Welcome to the Badlands, a place I don't think I or anyone I'm going to talk to expected to be. My name is Jared, and for the last 9 months, I've been an out-of-work ad agency senior suit. My last role was the Regional Client Service Director at Grey Singapore, delivering work around Southeast Asia and India. I returned to London last year, fully imagining I'd been in another agency fairly quickly, as had been the case over the last 2 decades, but not so much this time. So I found myself wandering the Badlands. In these 9 months, I've noticed a few odd things in our industry, and I've also noticed a surprising amount of ex-colleagues and clients all in a similar position to me. So I thought it might be helpful and maybe interesting to talk to some of these people, to see how they're doing, discover their experiences, understand what they're looking for, and maybe shine a light on them and their talents, but most importantly, check in with them, as it's a lonely experience being in the Badlands. So please welcome Rachel King. Rachel is a highly experienced creative director who has spent most of her 3-decade career at national TV broadcasters. She now finds herself in the Badlands after being made redundant after nearly 10 years service. And like many other experienced creatives, she is now navigating the uncertainty of finding her next full-time role for the first time in her career. Today we'll discuss that, what happened, and her experiences of being made redundant, and a search for new challenges, and the importance of networking and mentors, and I guess loads of other stuff. So please welcome Rachel King. Rachel, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yes, in fact, I'm just back from 2 weeks on Lake Garda, so I am fully refreshed, and you've caught me in tip-top form today. I should be, despite the hottest day of the year.
Well, no, there's something quite nice about taking time out from this madness that we are about to talk about. It's important. It's been touched on a few times, and I had a little bit of guilt going on holiday, and then you go, oh, no, you still got to reset and reframe and kind of settle yourself after the trials and tribulations of life. So if you have to go away, let's go. I'm glad you had a nice time. It looked well. We spoke a few weeks ago. Having been introduced by mutual friends, and your story it blew my mind when you look at your experience, which you'll tell people about in a second. But when we spoke, I was like, right, this is another example of just the madness that is happening within the creative industry as a whole, advertising, marketing, and I guess within your specific area around TV broadcasting, and which you'll touch on in a second. So I can't thank you enough for coming on and telling your story. I'm hoping other people who are listening take something from it, which is the intent. So I think to kick off, I touched on 3 decades of career. You've got as long as you want. I used to say, give us the 30-second thing, but if there's bollocks, you take as long as you want. So tell all my listeners just who you are and what you've been doing, and some of the amazing projects you've worked on, and then I guess why we're talking. Like, why are you in the Badlands?
Right. Okay. Yes. I'm glad I'm not dictated by time, because I can talk fast, but even cramming that in a couple of minutes might take a while. But you've said, 30 years experience. I guess the main thing is it's been leading in-house creative teams and across promotional campaigns, all within broadcast. So long stints at BBC, ITV, a little stint at Sky, and sort of various job titles. I think that's another thing that is quite confusing, but ultimately ended as creative director, but also head of creative or a creative head. But in my head, it's just an umbrella of creative leadership as a whole, responsible for a product and people making that content. So that's sort of the overview. And I've done it and I've loved it, and I don't think I've come to the end of my stint of doing that. There's more to give. So I think that's, which we'll obviously dig into. But most recently, I was the in-house creative director at ITV Creative. So I did lead the multidisciplinary teams, and they all created promotional campaigns, big and small, owned, organic, paid, basically all genres, all channels, all platforms. And I absolutely loved it. Yes, it was almost to the day to 10 years, and I was always passionate about the content. I think that's the thing that was really drove me forward every day to do what I did. I was paid to watch telly, which is obviously a brilliant perk if you like telly. And I knew that schedule inside out. I knew the programming, I knew the audience, I knew the talent. Cut me, I believed ITV. Very cliche, but I would say anyone who knew me knew that I would know what we were talking about, and I'd get inside the skin of every single thing that was broadcast. And that was my product. So that content was basically what I was selling to the customer, who was, the audience. And so I needed to know it. And that enthusiasm and that sort of boundless energy for creating stuff using that content is what drove me forward. And that's what brought the team together. I think that, that was the glue that got everybody excited. So every single drop of it, from, the entertainment stuff is probably my preference, but we're talking juggernauts. We're going back to the days of X Factor, The Voice, Britain's Got Talent, Saturday Night Takeaway, I'm a Celebrity, a huge, long-standing series which join the nation together. That you can all sit down and 10 million people watch on a Saturday night. Creating those campaigns was brilliant. And then the thrill of live sporting events. So working on the World Cup, working on the Grand National, working on Six Nations, Tour de France, French Open. A whole span of stuff, genres. From yin and yang. And then, of course, all the fascinating factual docs and series, everything from sort of Long Lost Family, Gordon, Gino and Fred, Olivia Atwood. There's lots of stuff, all the content that's coming through, the new, the stuff in the pipeline, the meetings that I'd be able to have with commissioners and program makers just to kind of get inside what it was that they were creating was brilliant. Then there was dramas, so there's Trigger Point. The last thing I probably worked on at the start of the year was Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, and the incredible impact that had, watching that in advance and, having that knowledge, and nobody really probably quite could have predicted its impact. But, having a small part in something like that was brilliant. And that's what I loved about it, working for that broadcasting world. Then there's always on stuff. So there's always news brand, there's reality shows, there's TOWIE, there's CITV. So actually it was a massive portfolio that we promoted every single scrap of along the way. And that's everything. That's I think it's using the content for clip-based stuff or call to action, social posts, for returning titles, but also conceptual pieces of work. So, huge film shoots, or, how do you drive a launch of a hefty paid media budget? How are we targeting these people? What are we doing differently? How do we make an experience out of it? There was always a different creative challenge to the brief. And I think I thrived on it. That variety and that volume, the make list really was. I think that what you get in the broadcast agency is it's volume, and the more hundreds of titles. I'm not working on one thing. I'm working on 25 things. So constantly busy. That feeds the energy for 10 years.
It's like you're essentially the creative director of these amazing brands. Like, there's so many amazing brands under your stewardship within the ITV stable, as it were, which is it's incredible. You were at the BBC as well. Like, was that a similar sort of thing you were doing back in the day? I just want people to understand that you've done it all, because it's mad when you read your CV, just the things.
Well, yeah, I guess so. I joined ITV in 2014, and that was as we launched as we launched Love Island, as we revamped ITV4, etc. There was that was almost like the next step up. But you're right. Up until that point, I'd launched Lifetime Channel, the US Lifetime Channel A&E networks. That was sort of like a little stepping stone into the commercial world, I guess, because prior to that, I had 20 years at the BBC, which sounds like a terrifying. I know. Well, that was that was sort of early 90s when I joined as a production assistant in Radio 3. So I worked all the way up to creative head within the creative department, which was, I think by that point, it was in-house. It's called BBC Broadcast. It then became Red Bee Media. But again, the breadth of channels, BBC 2, BBC 3 was launched. It was BBC Knowledge, I think, before it was BBC 4. And then, the things I'm proud of, I guess, was working on the launch of CBBC back in 2002. We take that for granted now, but the initiation of a sort of child, non-advertised child-only channel was extraordinary. Yeah, I look back and I think, especially with the sort of current climate, that I did the first campaign ever for Strictly Come Dancing. I think that was in 2004. And again, just those huge titles like EastEnders we do over and over again, and realizing how many people were talking about it, how many were watching it. Wallace and Gromit, Doctor Who, Glastonbury, Children Need, the titles that you had access to, and the way that you have to, especially with the returners, it's like, what is there's always a constant creative renewal, because it's going to come around again. You need to do something different. How do you approach maybe the same brief 3 years in a row? Or, that obviously we work with insights. We need to know what the marketing slants is and the audience group, but creatively you need to come up with a new hook. You need to stay relevant. Some of those older titles I referenced from ITV, before they start to feel a bit tired, how do you keep keeping them modern? How do you work with Ant and Dec to, almost reinvent them or just stay relevant. So I think it always came with creative challenges. So despite being in the same places for a long time, I never stood still, and there was lots of opportunity to constantly be doing. And I guess that was my job, is to get, teams thinking differently or connecting different people together to spark new ideas and creativity. But I would challenge someone to name a show across those broadcasters that I haven't had an involvement in, because I think it's
madness, right? I'm literally sat here listening, thinking, this is unbelievable, and then remembered I'm supposed to be doing a podcast with you, as opposed to I'm just listening to you go. I'm like, this is fucking unbelievable, the stuff she's worked on. I think I was duly stood here thinking, I would hazard a guess that as a creative director, if you put yourself against all of the creative directors in London, I would guarantee more people have seen and interacted with more of your things than any other creative director in London. Because
do you know what? I'll take that. Yes, I love that.
We get excited in the ad industry when we put our awards papers in and we go, hey, look, 50,000 people like this. And you go, oh, right, yeah, 20 million people used to watch my show that I used to do the comms.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just a different world, which, and in my head, I was also thinking that kind of repetition piece you were talking about, how do you kind of keep creatively talking about a thing that's coming back season after season? You could walk a creative director's job within the FMCG world, trust me, because it's all they do every year. It's the same shit that they're putting out with a slight twist.
Yes, we'll come on to that, because I think that that is obviously where my head was going. When I found myself, departing from ITV, it's like, but we'll come to that.
Why on earth? How on earth are you having to talk to me on my little podcast? Like, why are you? What happened? Like, because it doesn't make sense. They're still going, those broadcasting channels, from what I understand. So what's going on? It was a shock, right? And I think it was, so my sort of unplanned entry into the Badlands, it was at the start of this year. And as I say, I've obviously, as we just listed, worked across every single possible thing, and yet wasn't bored. There was more to come. There is a challenge, I will rise to it. That energy hasn't died, that flame is still alive. And I've always sort of adapted and shapeshifted. I've moved roles internally. I've felt established and secure. I've extended the portfolio. I've taken extra responsibilities. I've weathered restructures. I've prided myself on continuing to grow. And maybe I sort of slightly felt immortal. I don't know. I kind of think, I'm always going, I'm here. I'm respected. I'm skilled. I'm performing. I'm positive. So surely, my name won't be on the list. And I think it was, there was time to change at ITV Creative. I could see that. I just didn't have the visibility or awareness or warning that I would be part of the vision. I wouldn't be part of the vision, rather, and the change that was coming. And I think that hurt. And I think I took it personally. It's very difficult for me to accept it wasn't me. It was, I think I remember saying, is it me or is it the job? Obviously the role doesn't exist, or it's being restricted. The landscape is changing. I appreciate that, but I think I personally took it as it's you we don't want, and I think that's what I need to take away and then sort of deconstruct and then rebuild, and that's been the hardest challenge, I think. Yeah, it's I've spoken about it a few times with people. It's incredibly hard not to take these things personally, and you kind of go through a bit of a weird existential kind of loss of identity and what did I do wrong, and yes, and all these questions. And I'm going to be doing an episode with a good friend of mine who we work together, and she's been recently let go. The global business that she looked after incredibly successfully and grew over a few years, and it was going gangbusters at the particular agency in London that she was working at. Someone somewhere in the North America decided to take all of that business and bring it all in-house to New York, and which meant her and her team were surplus to requirements. Like, nothing to do with her performance, nothing to do with how well she'd been doing, or the team, or the money it'd been making. She was just screwed by some business decision made by someone else. And I think I'd say vast majority of the time, that's the reality of it. It doesn't make it easier. It sucks and it's awful. But I think it's important you kind of get to that point, I think, where you realize it's probably that, as opposed to yourself. And I know when you and I spoke, kind of going through that whole thing yourself around what could I have done differently. And weirdly, I don't think there's much, to be honest, when it's a restructuring thing. I spoke to a CEO in an early episode who navigated an incredibly tough few years, taking the agency through, going gangbusters, big merger happened. The CEO of the incoming company that they were merged with took up. Nothing to do with her performance from the last couple of years. So it clearly happens, but you have to go through this kind of awful feeling of shit. What have I done?
And sort of shame. I think what I've also noticed, because I've obviously spoken to many people, is I kind of spin it now. It's like, well, I got to 30 years before I got, many people have had multiple rounds, or, it's almost like, oh, I got to I got further down the track than maybe others had. And so I'll take that. It was outside of my control, but doesn't mean I need to see that as a positive. And it's just now, where do I take all that experience? And I think because I've only ever worked for large organizations, so actually I felt even more isolated. I'm like, I've worked for these big broadcasters. So when I'm left on my own, I'd sort of completely lost my identity.
Right.
Without a job, I didn't really know who I was. And I've sort of used this sort of slightly dodgy analogy of like a snail without a shell. So I feel like, looking back, my title and my role defined who I was. I was Rachel from ITV, or, even my friends call me BBC Rachel because there's 2 Rachels in my friend group. So, you know what I mean? So if you take that off, it's like, God, you realise I don't really know who I am without a job, because I've never not had one. I've never had to think about who I am, maybe. And so I think it's really more life defining than I imagined it would be. And once you get past the kind of, it's all, say it's all a bit shit, but it's like, oh God, actually, so the world is my oyster. And that's, it's like, sometimes like the people say having a wide open brief is the hardest thing. It's like everyone likes to have, stay within the lane, or give me some boundaries. And so it's actually, you could do anything now. It's like, that doesn't make it any easier. In fact, I think I've learned along the way that's probably, the scattergun approach has meant I then haven't been necessarily hugely focused on, I just need a job, and so I'll go for every single thing there is going in and hope, as a sort of numbers game, I'll get something eventually. And I think that sort of rudderless was a knee-jerk reaction.
No, for sure. And I think, again, from many conversations now with many people in various stages of their time in the Badlands, there's a very clear arc to their individual journey, which goes from shock to scattergun. I'm applying for every single thing that I ever see ever anywhere, and then you start to realize, no, I don't want to work there. That's awful. And then you start becoming a lot more laser focused, and then you start thinking about, well, what else could I do? So there's a weird natural arc of self discovery a little bit, and going through the kind of applying for stuff. And then I think what most people found, or certainly what I found, and some of the people I've spoken to, the horrendous feeling of being rejected from a shit job that you didn't even want to do in the first place, but it was the only one to apply for that day, is the most soul-destroying thing in the world. It's worse than not getting a job you would love. I think it's actually a worse feeling. So I think you start to become much more focused and targeted once you've had the time to take stock a little bit and think about your next move. So yeah, you're certainly on that journey from the conversations we've been having. It's your point about when you can do anything, you weirdly become quite frozen by that fact. I found it quite debilitating. It felt like, oh, you can go and work anywhere. Well, I said, well, what do you mean? Do you mean any ad agency? Because it doesn't work like that, because they're not hiring. It becomes this weird, yes, you can go and do anything, but it's like you say, a wild brief. It's the classic kind of, who's it aimed at? Everyone. Well, it's not, is it?
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
So is that, we are the living embodiment of needing to be very targeted with our own brief about our own kind of thing moving forward. And I think it's important for people listening. Everyone gets to it, but I think the sooner you get to it, the better you feel about yourself. Whatever the thing is you start going after it, it feels better to be a bit more focused than just throwing shit at a wall and see what sticks. I don't think that's the way, particularly in today's still challenging job market. I don't think it's the way. So have you?
I mean, I certainly.
Go on, sorry.
Go on.
No, I was going to say, I know you've been out and about since early in the year, and it came as quite a shock to you. How have you found? Because clearly you kind of went from one big place to a kind of intermediate place to then to ITV, and now you're in this world of, like you said, you can do anything. Your thought process, like, what are you looking for? How have you been finding job hunting for the first time in 3 decades, as opposed to, what you imagined it would be, and the good, the bad, and the ugly? Because I think it's important for people to hear.
Yeah, and you know what, we've sort of already been there. And obviously, I have found it tough. I think that's partly me as a person. I mean, two things. One, I'm probably a bit of a control freak. I like to have not control over things, but like I like order and routine. And I guess once when they say I can't control this, because I like to say I can look for the jobs, but I never know what's. So the more you put in, or more applications you put, it doesn't make any difference. But I feel I need to do something. I'm a doer.
Yeah.
So maybe again, I think the naivety of not ever being in this position. I'm like, I'd easily get another role. And somebody early on said to me, it's a full-time job to find a full-time job. And I'm like, what is he talking about? But they mean, you've got to put in the legwork, you've got to follow it up, you take time over your applications. And I get that. And I think you're in a positive headspace rather than trying to do it at midnight alongside the day job. So I thought, okay, I've got the time. But I have also, that said, fallen into every single trap. So, I've contacted agencies, I've used the job boards, recruiters, I've tried production companies, I've scattergunned every single sector where I thought my skills and experience could be transferable or relevant or refreshingly different or complementary. But I'd like to sort of make a sort of campaign against the easy apply. I think that button should be banned, because it should never be easy to apply for a role. The amount of times I've sat there and just, it's like scrolling, it's like, TikTok or one of those things. I'm just going to press easy apply. I don't care. They don't care. I don't know what it is, but I've applied. It literally took me 30 seconds, if not 3 seconds. So I think that's, I very quickly racked up volume. So I don't know, 100 applications, right? I had zero response, like zero. So then I'm like, okay, this is not for me. But it felt like I was doing something, but then it was also counterintuitive because it was gaining me nothing. And if anything, it was sort of then eking away at the confidence. So I sort of arrived at the thing of, well, in-house agency is obviously, all of my knowledge, but there's plenty of those now, like you pointed out, not just within broadcasters, but with lots of companies bringing it in-house, FMCG. Yeah. So I did go down that path, but I didn't have FMCG experience. I'm like, well, no, I'm not hiding that. I can tell you right now I don't, but I can sell something to somebody, and it's the fundamentals. And so the frustration for me was, unless you're a carbon copy of what they want, or the not matching up thing was sort of baffling, because there was no, I don't even think it's a risk. I think someone once said, maybe on the recruiter, said, we do sometimes put a wild card forward. I'm like, Christ, I'm not a wild card. I'm not crazy. I've got experience, which surely you'd want, but it was just, I think it's just the language sometimes. And so I found it very difficult. I sort of then backed up a bit and thought, well, maybe I'll stay in my place of sort of media and entertainment brands. That door was also closed. Then I thought, well, I'll go to tech companies. You know what? I'll go somewhere. I'll be this sort of wacky creative background, and I'll go to the driest banking tech company, because they'll want someone completely fresh and new coming in. Door was closed. I tried startups, the opposite of what I've done with big organizations. But then I've also gone to other big companies just to go, like I say, sort of every step along the way on the scale, but not really any interest. And even with broadcast media, all the way back round to kind of, well, I'll just tap up broadcasters. I think even that's tricky to get back in. It's just, anyway, it's sort of like, it's got to a stage where I've gone round, the circle's turned 2 or 3 times now. So I'm just letting the dust settle on that. Because ultimately it is soul crushingly difficult. And, I've done the CV, probably I do it, update it, I tweak it, I don't know, monthly, but even before then, probably daily. I've done a LinkedIn profile, but there is an invisibility, because it's like, gosh, there is no one looking for no one's buying what I'm selling. And I find that very hard.
Well, equally, the challenge is as well, you're a creative and you have a book of 30 years worth of work. Like, you should be able to ring someone and go, remember Anton Deck? Yeah. Well, I did all that stuff. It's like, people have seen your stuff, they've seen your output, but without you getting the opportunity to kind of talk through your work, as in they meet you and the book, they're two separate things, right? And we've talked about the importance of how do you find people which can deliver whatever the creative requirement is, and if that's something
Yeah.
you're struggling with at the moment, I take it, yeah.
Yes, yes, and I guess what I've also come up against, touched on it very briefly before, is sort of the job title. They mean different things to different people. So, chasing down what I think looks good on paper, unless you can have a conversation further about what it actually is, it's really hard to define. And I want a role where they're buying me, and that is essentially what I'm selling. Yes, I've got a portfolio of work, but yeah, through all of what I've ever done, it's been the incredible content and creative work. I think it's always been my passion. Where I found my feet was when I was leading, managing, and nurturing a team. Right, so basically, yeah. I'm this people person, and so I don't want to necessarily just be defined by the what. It's how do you make it and who is involved. And so, my mission is very much to make sure everyone's the best version of themselves and maximizing their talent. My expertise as a creative leader lies in that ability to gain trust and respect from those around me, to bring together the right people, to inspire people, to get everyone talking together and creating something amazing. There's no ego here, absolutely none. I don't want personal gain or attribution or glory. I just want to harness that combined power of people pulling in the same direction and almost humanizing creativity. So that centerpiece, beating heart, glue, grease, whatever it is that's sort of holding the whole thing together, I am that person that will be getting the results by collaboratively working. Because I talk to people, I listen, I'm fair, I'm supportive, I'm decisive, engaged, proactive, reactive, whatever it may be. So I think that's where I'm like, I can step away from the Ant and Dex of this world, but I could take that skill set of team leadership and dynamic sort of energy. That's what I mean. I could take it into I could be making something completely different, or building a team that's not performing very well. And how do you change culture within a team? That's where I'm thinking it's sort of just broadening out rather than going down a very slim path of, are my ads better than your ads? Because I don't think I'm ever going to win that race.
Well, I would jump in there and say, if you can convince anyone to be interested in Ant and Dec, you can convince people to buy a particular toothpaste or a particular airline seat or a particular car, because that's quite a challenge. I've totally lost my train of thought because it's so mind-bending the heart in my house right now. It's interesting you were saying about pulling teams together and pulling people together. The word we've used a bunch of times for you is experience, right? And a lot of the people I'm speaking to is experienced in whatever it is they've been doing, in particular side of the aisle of marketing or advertising or creative industry like you. And it sounds like any company, any agency, any internal department, any internal marketing department who deals in creatives output and having to manage multi-age, multi-discipline parties would benefit with someone like you, in this case, coming in with lots of experience, right? Having been there, done it. And it's not in a way, it's not in the sense of, I know everything because I'm of a certain age or I've been doing it so long the time. It's just, how to get the best out of people, what bullshit so far, what you need to dial up. And there's such value in experience, yet value of experience seems to be the last thing that people are looking for at the moment in the hiring market, which is the bit that's mind-bending for me personally and seems really frustrating and mind-bending for you at the moment. It's such a strange thing. I'm doing a podcast next week with a creative in India. I had the good fortune in my last role of working on delivering work in India and met a bunch of amazing creatives in India. And the person I'm talking to is a senior creative, and he's now in a position where he's struggling because his experience is no longer counting for anything. And he's got some really interesting stories to tell about the Indian market from a creative director point of view and an ECD point of view. And there's such similarities. When I spoke to him about India and the Indian market, it's like, it's the same problem that he's facing over there as what you're facing. So again, back to, it's not you, it's the industry. It feels good to know that, but equally like, well, hang on, how do we bring that to the awareness of everyone? How do we change it? How do we get in? Which is the answer I don't have, but it's very frustrating, as I know you're going through. Have you,
Yeah,
go on, sir.
no, you go.
No, I was just gonna say, so in terms of like, have you had any joy? Has there been anything where, or is it just been closed doors at the moment? And if so, like, how are you handling that mentally? Like, what are you doing to kind of keep your own sanity? Because it's a big part of it. You mentioned in the beginning, identity comes with work. It does for a lot of people. And when you lose that, you start lose your own mind a little bit. I certainly did for a while. I started a podcast as a result of losing my own mind, just so I could talk to other people.
Well, yeah, well, yes, and I think there is a bit of that sort of. I'm not great on my own. Like I say, I'm a team player, so I thrive on being in an office. Interacting with other people. So I think so. I have had, there's been some sort of initial reaching out and go, oh yes, you sound great, but that recruitment filter, internal or external, but then it's never followed through because the next person, whoever is then reviewing, we're back round full circle at looking at who I am on a piece of paper, or what is your latest piece of work, or whatever it is. We all know how this works. You don't get feedback on very rarely get feedback, but I find it, I don't want to be judged or filtered on a piece of paper. I've said from the get-go, you are buying me, so you have to meet me and I can sell me, but I can't do that unless I need to get to the physical stage. I can have a conversation, early chat, but I can't get through if it's just, I think that's the thing. There's no one's interested enough, or whatever it is. I don't know how to, people talk about personal brand and packaging and, how do you come across? And so I guess for a while I put off, putting together a website. So, oh gosh, it makes my head spin. And I just, I don't think that's me. It's all sort of willy waving. I don't know. But anyway, I didn't feel the confident place, but actually having thought about it and had a conversation, I realized what I do have is a very large sort of black book almost of contacts and ex-colleagues, but obviously endorsements and quotes and well wishers. And I thought, gosh, it's not my words. It's not me selling me. Look at what other people have said about me. So I've built this, the website's built in such a way that the first page is like, this is me, but don't take my word for it, because here's all these people I've worked with, and it's consistent, thankfully. Everybody has I've asked, and the statement has always been incredibly positive, and no one's ever thought I was an arsehole, thankfully. I've worked with a very large range of people. Literally, like I say, 30 years, that's a big roll call of people, and everybody, the loyalty that I can get from a team, years and years later, people will still go, yes, I really like working with you. And I'm like, well, great, but tell other people that, and then they can. But I find it very hard to say it in my own words, and so that's what I've done. I've opted to use other people to sort of to sell me. I suppose that's very me. That's like, I'm not the front man here. Let other people tell you all about me. But of course, you don't get that from the work, and so that's where I've spun it, so that I want to be recognised. Because it's like, if you read, and maybe people just don't read the endorsements, maybe that's just a thing, but it would be really interesting. That's how I've spun it, so that it's like, it's the person, and then it's it's the who and then the what. That I've tried to sort of craft, I guess, just as a point of difference. Whether or not it's got me anywhere, not yet, is the short answer. But determined not to give up.
Yeah, well,
6 months in.
That's a really important part of it for anyone listening. And obviously, we've spoken about it offline. It's a war of attrition. You've got to keep going, and something will come along. I think there's a massive importance. You touched on it from a human point of view. Can trying to get the face to face is a big part of it. And have you really thrown yourself into networking? And I think you're working with a mentor who we both happen to know. Do you want to mention anything about that? Because I think it's an equally important thing for you. I know it's been beneficial for you, but for other people listening, there's such value in kind of expanding your own role, almost creating a team of people to help in the Badlands is such a vital thing. Like, if you've got a few people you kind of connecting with and touching with, is I think it's super super useful. Is that what you've been experiencing? Is that what you've been doing?
100%. And again, so far out of my comfort zone in many ways to do that. And I guess because when you've got a job, you don't, I was probably looking inwards at the, within the inbox. I wasn't looking outwards. I wasn't really aware of what other people were doing. I wasn't really, I was focused on the day to day and the delivering in my world. But so the first thing I did on sort of day one of the rest of my life was, let's write a list of everybody I've ever worked with, and that list just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then, you know, eternally thankful for everybody who has taken the time to speak to me, or even just send me an email or have a coffee, or, you know, I've absolutely networked and I've connected, I've reconnected, I've cold called some people. I've just said, look, I'm really interested in what your job, can I find out more? People are generous with their time. I've followed people, I've stalked people, I've reached out to people, you know, well over 100 people. And so, you know, there must be, I'm going into the universe needs to give me something back. So sort of proactivity is absolutely, I'm not waiting for it to land in my lap. I know it won't. I know I will need to drive it, and I'm very happy to do that. But I will follow every lead. If somebody goes, oh, you should talk to so-and-so, I'm like, yeah, I will do that. Yeah. Like I said to you, I will do my homework. You know, I will, if anyone asks me. And so I did. I had a coach. So I think that was sort of just helping me find my way when I was probably at my lowest. And then I applied through the Who's Your Mama scheme, and I got a mentor. I was chosen on the scheme, you know, and I never thought I've never had a mentor. And I thought it would be a really brilliant opportunity when I'm at this sort of career crossroads. And I like the no nonsense, you know, I like to be told things straight. And so, you know, really practical advice. So the coach is sort of really nice, cozy, fluffy, encouraging. And then the mentor is very focused on actions. And so between the two, that's really helped me. I've then gone on to be a mentor myself with the Ideas Foundation. So I've joined those guys voluntarily and had a mentee. So again, talking to someone else who's obviously in a different journey because they're 18, just leaving a college, but they need career advice. I'm like, so I can help someone. So I mean, that's the whole circle of life right there. So someone helps me, and then I think, gosh, that's given me the confidence to then go and help somebody else. So I've kind of done full circle on those things. You there? You lost me?
Yeah. Sorry, no? It's okay. It keeps cutting in and out, but it doesn't matter. It's fine. It's a real conversation. Keep going.
Okay. So I guess to that point, you know, I have kept busy because obviously it's not just day in, day out on LinkedIn. So I think I've also taken up volunteering with a charity called Bookmark, which I always wanted to do, which was helping kids school age to help with their reading. I'd never had the opportunity to do that sort of stuff before. And so, you know, I feel really sort of nourished in that sense. You know, I've definitely used the time that I've had. I've done an online digital marketing diploma because I wanted to keep learning. I needed to understand, you know, God forbid AI. And, you know, I've just sort of thought, like, I can't sit still because the world is turning and I'm already starting to fall behind. And so, you know, having an awareness of what's going on around me it's been brilliant. You know, I've been through the wardrobes, I've embraced vintage, I've done, you know, all the things, the sort of jobs you put off. It's a really good time to go, I've been productive today. The way I work best is to go, this is what I've achieved today, right? One thing a day, or, you know, one step at a time. And that just helps with my routine, maybe mental health or whatever. But it's just, you know, that's just, might have a job, but I'm making a difference somewhere along the line in some shape or form, in something I can control.
Yeah, look, you're describing all the things to do and the things that personally I've found help, and then I know from speaking to others that they get to that point where equally, you kind of have to, you almost like chunk up your day a little bit. There's some job hunting time, but there's also some growth and self-development time. There's just personal time. There's, you know, hustling time and doing stuff that you were putting off for years because you're too busy, and, you know, volunteering. It's amazing stuff. So it's the one slight silver lining of the Badlands. If you're in it long enough, you actually weirdly get to do, if you're in a fortunate enough position, to do stuff that you never got to do before, and you can, it's not all doom and gloom. And I think it then keeps you energized and happy for the ultimate slog, which is keeping going and looking for your next permanent thing, because clearly you've got lots to give, and we all do. And I think the experience thing, my last episode, which kind of focused on AI, Phil had a really strong point of view around the importance of experience is going to come back real quick in organizations when technology like AI starts becoming the go-to. Then you're going to need subject matter experts to be using and be part of the exploration of AI and how AI is being then deployed and developed in kind of handling briefs and requirements for clients moving forward, you're going to need experienced people to know whether it's right or wrong or whether it's doing is accurate. Because if you're just leaning on new folk, junior folk, what's their barometer? How they're going to be? How are you going to understand if what the outputs are from automated AI-based large language model stuff is going to be relevant if you don't have the experience to kind of work with it and test it? So I think hanging in there is a big part of it. I think doing all the things you've been talking about is vital. I guess as we start to wrap up, a question that I think is super useful, and it's useful because it really throws people, which is why I ask it ahead of time, is kind of, is there an ideal place or a dream job or a dream company that you'd like to work for? Is because you know what, we'll send them this and we can call them out. Because clearly cold calling is not a problem for you as a creative. So
no, absolutely not. No shame. Yeah. Well, I think even having had the question, and I've listened to the podcast and know you ask it, and you asked it to me, and even with all that preparation, I still haven't really got it. I don't, and also maybe I don't know whether I want to define it now. I think ultimately, it's an organised. I can bring something to an organisation, an area where they want cultural change, or I can bring the right hand, left hand together. Where do they need human interaction? Where can I engage a team that become more collaborative, constructive, productive, motivated? Surely. Even on a short-term stuff, right? This doesn't have to be perm. This is like parachute me in. I'm very happy with that sort of coming like a, there's an outsider's perspective is incredibly useful. Get the best out of people, spotting those sort of, problems that maybe can't be seen. Where are the inefficiencies? How do we get the creative team working? Or how do we get a team to be creative? They don't have to be making something. So those sort of, that skill set, that little whole ball of energy that I can bring, wherever that may be. So I don't think there's any brand I wouldn't work for. I don't have that, the net is wide, the bar is low. I don't have any huge scruples or morals and things particularly. We've talked separately, but I think, increasingly I am probably drawn to charity sector just because I think there is a point in your life where you go, I really think I love telly and it's brilliant. It brings so much to people's lives. But, wouldn't it be brilliant to be doing something else? And maybe because I have started to do a few projects voluntarily, if I was retired, and I think that's what this feels like to me, I'm in my early 50s, so this feels like a forced early retirement, and I'm pushing against something. If I was in a different space, if I didn't have my mortgage, my mortgage was paid off and my son was grown up, I'd absolutely be going, do you know what? Thank you very much, because now I can do all the incredible things I want to be able to do. I want to help with the music therapy. I want to be, doing chair yoga with old people. There's 100 things I want to do, but right now, that's not fulfilling the gap. I'm not really ready to downsize or take my foot off the gas. I'll happily change direction to do my squiggly career, but it's just finding that entry point. And so there's a company we chatted in before called Well Placed, who offer internships for people in their 50s to kind of, go in entry level in order to get experience. And so that's a scheme that is running and that I'm sort of been in contact with them. But, lots of organisations are, I don't know. I think it's the ages thing. I know other people have talked to you about that. I don't want to sort of bang on about the age point, but I think there does feel a bit of feels like we're in the 1970s. I can't work it out. I'm like, gosh, get your carriage clock, off you go. I still want to use my brain. I've still got the skills and experience. And so I'd like to think the sort of charity would embrace that, but obviously they're not. I need to find the right role. And then the two strands, I guess, the areas of interest, if I was to pinpoint it, would be the kids sector. So, right back from CBBC days, I've always really loved working on content for kids or investing in the next generation, like reading to the kids or, nurturing students and any sort of educational things. Back when I was a child, I wanted to be a teacher. Thankfully, I don't think it probably would have been for me, but I feel like there's a nurturing maternal instinct, which is obviously why I also like the team leadership. I'm a great manager of people. Yeah. So, I feel like I always say I've got one child at home and like 15 in the workplace. I care about other people. And so something in that world, and there's a role that I reached out to for the Royal Foundation, I think. So, how do you get into those spaces? And then the other sort of strand of interest, and also I guess I've done more over the years. So there was CITV, there was ITVX. There's lots of kids content that I'm aware of and have and the sort of sensitivity. But then the other thing back in the real olden days was when I did a music degree, which sort of got to where I am. And so really, I think maybe there's a pull back to something in the arts and music world, right. Combining that with charity. Again, I've done the sort of singing for the brain with Alzheimer's. I've done some volunteering there. So personal areas of interests. But again, I don't know whether that becomes the job or whether those things just carry on alongside it until the point that they can become, fill my time when I've paid off the mortgage. I don't know whether there'll be enough of an opportunity there to still grow and have the responsibility that I'm craving, seniority. Those maybe feel like hobbies that, in a pie chart, that line will go up in the day job. I'll go part-time with it, 5 years down the line. But I reckon I've got 5-10 years to go. So I don't really want to go too quickly into this slippery slope of retirement. Following passions is one thing, but I'm very happy to have a job that will still test me and push me.
We're all slightly addicted to it as well, and I think that's part of it. It's like we've been conditioned. There's a little bit of Stockholm syndrome, a little bit attached to the ad industry and marketing industry and creative industry, where at times it feels horrendous, but you actually love it. And it's clear from speaking to you on numerous occasions now. You'd be an asset. I mean, the thing you described about your ideal job, I was sat there thinking, well, any company I've ever known would benefit from you.
That's what I mean. But that's what I mean. That is what I want to get to the States. It's like, come on, guys. It doesn't matter. And actually, anecdotally, you speak to parents, etc. Like, oh yeah, God, I work in a bank or I work in this company and no one talks to each other. I'm like, right, okay, you could probably fix that. So, but it's not a label. That's moving me away from creative director. But that's what I have done. I think I do think there's a path I can take that is narrower and to, down that. I just need to work out how to sell that perhaps, and how do I get in to have these clients, or how can I help businesses just be better at doing what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure people listening will understand and take a lot from that. And I do think there'd be one or two people that haven't had this conversation with you. I've made some notes, and I'm going to introduce you to two people offline.
Thank you.
I think we've, just to wrap up, I think we've talked about networking is probably going to be the way that most people in the Badlands solve their problem in the Badlands. Sure, I've been hitting the lottery of the easy apply button once and it comes in, but you wasted it because you should have done the numbers on the lottery and the Euro Millions that day. I'm short of that miracle happening. It feels like networking and people are going to be the answer to most people's Badlands problems. So I'm going to share this episode probably back end later this week. And it's clear that you're super talented. You've worked on some of the most amazing products and content and TV shows that the country's ever made. Clearly, in my opinion, you could walk into most ad agencies and work on most briefs, because some of the challenges stuff you've worked on, isn't an insignificance when it's shampoo or detergent or whatever nonsense that we're dealing with.
Bring it on.
Because ultimately it's people, and it's about bringing people together to solve a business problem using creativity, and that's what you do, and you've clearly been amazing at it for the last 3 decades. So I can't thank you enough, Rachel, for taking the time to speak to me. I'm glad we did it after your holiday. You sound super recharged and excited. There's still lots to do, but no doubt you'll smash it. I think keep doing what you're doing. And I know there'll be people listening that take a lot from listening to you, because it's never really the person's fault. It's always, we're kind of a little bit victims of circumstance and timing, and our place in the industry at the moment is under threat from various factors: economic, social, technology, and I think people are going to help. People will be the answer to solving some of these problems. So I can't thank you enough, Rachel. Thank you for your time so much.
Thank you so much. Yes, brilliant. Thank you.
No worries. Just down the line a second, I just want to talk to you about a note that I've made. You've probably explored it by the sounds of your own tenacity, but you never know. I'll just down the line a second. But thank you so much for this. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Yeah.